The church, in her deep wisdom and vast experience, proposes through her liturgy things that are worthy of contemplation. And in contemplating, they give life. Consider last evening. This morning, Father Timothy and I were speaking at breakfast. And last night's liturgy alone is a tidal wave of information, of things that are worthy of contemplating. Father John Pietropalli last night told me he's going to take just the collects after each of the readings and spend the next week contemplating them. The richness, so rich that you can't take it all in. Imagine what God's going to be like. If we can't even take in the liturgy, imagine the source, what it will be like as we spend an eternity contemplating love himself, life himself, beauty and truth himself, goodness himself. It will take an eternity just to begin. And yet that's our hope. And last evening, the church set before us a series of readings, an arc, if you will, of salvation history, beautifully, that God created in the beginning, the heavens and the earth, light and darkness, all creatures. And in so narrating this, Israel was reminding itself that the world, the nations around them, all had pagan gods. And they believed in deities, the sun, the moon, the stars. They made idols of creatures, bulls and lions and tigers and bears. Oh my, couldn't resist. But in Israel's faith, it was saying, no, those are all creatures. They're subject to God. And then we're reminded of Abraham. Abraham didn't go looking for God. God revealed himself to Abraham. And then he made a promise to him. The God who makes promises and keeps his promises, even as the book of Hebrews will tell us, Abraham had to hope against hope in one of those promises. And then Moses in the Exodus and the release from slavery and the invitation into freedom that God makes to each one of us today. And Hosea and Ezekiel and Isaiah. And there's a little phrase from Amos that didn't make it into last night's liturgy, but it is in the Liturgy of the Hours. And it says, he who made the Pleiades and Orion, he reveals his thoughts to man. And the psalmist will one day ask, what is man that you even consider us, that you would reveal yourself to us? Who are we and who are you? And yesterday, if you want other things to contemplate, by the way, go back and find out what psalms and what readings the church proposed on Holy Saturday. So profoundly rich as now the church contemplates what it means that our Lord did on Holy Thursday and Good Friday, and now on Saturday as we try and figure out what is going on. And I'd like to pass through one of those psalms with you. Psalm 24. And a question is posed to us. Who shall climb the mountain of the Lord? And who shall stand in his holy place? The man with clean hands and pure heart, who desires not worthless things, who has not sworn so as to deceive his neighbor. And yet, when the church proposes this for our contemplation and our prayer yesterday, on Friday, what did we do with the man with clean hands? We nailed those hands to the cross. And what was his response? Father, forgive them. Forgive them. Because time and again they seem not to know what they do. But one day they will. So keep forgiving them. The man with clean hands, and we nailed them to the cross. The man with a pure heart, and we put a lance through that side, and we pierced that pure heart. And what was his response? To pour forth blood and water, to give us the regeneration of baptism, to feed us with the Eucharist. And I will never earn that. And his response is to keep pouring forth. Psalm 24 continues, O gates, lift high your heads. Grow higher, ancient doors. Let him enter, the King of glory. And immediately the psalm puts another question. Who is this King of glory? The Lord, the mighty, the valiant. The Lord, the valiant in war. What a great phrase. For a peacemaker, he's a warrior. He's a warrior. And he did what you and I cannot do. And that's what we celebrate today. He went into those areas of my own life that I either can't get to or I'm afraid to get to. And he entered in there. Think about what he did on Thursday. He kneels down, he washes the feet of his disciples. They're bickering about who's the greatest, who's the most talented, who's the smartest. One of them is thinking about betraying him, and still he washes those feet. And then he pours the totality of his self-giving and his love and his friendship and his life into that Eucharist. And still we don't get it. But he doesn't stop. He'll never give up. And then on Friday, he takes all of my shame and all of my weaknesses and my pride and my selfishness and my sensuality and my vanity, and he takes it as if it were his. And he takes the yelling and the spitting and the buffeting, and he takes it all. And he nails it to the cross, and he puts an end, he puts a limit to what sin and death can actually do. This morning I walked into this chapel, and the lights were not yet on, but the sun was coming through here, and open the chapel, and I look up, and the first thing I see was actually not the flowers or the candle, but the cross is still there. And there's a part that can confuse us if we're not careful, but it's important that we understand. The resurrection does not take away the cross. It just gives meaning to it. It puts it in perspective. Something didn't go wrong with the cross. Everything went right. But the cross reveals several things. One is the totality of our Lord's love for me. But it also reveals the ugliness of my selfishness and pride and sensuality if I don't give them to Christ. It reveals what things could look like if love was not in this world. The other day when I was hearing confessions on Good Friday down in Manhattan, I was profoundly struck by the number of times I would come and hear somebody and tears would be coming, male and female. And there's a cross in their life, and I would have to repeat to them, our Lord is there in that suffering that you're telling me about. He's not on the other side of the suffering which we want to get through. When he enters into that cross, when he puts love and makes that cross his love, when he takes your misery and my misery, when he takes our circumstances to himself, by so doing, he says, you can find me here as well. I may not change your circumstances, but even in these difficult circumstances, I can be found. Let me find you and look for me even here, even in this valley of tears. As I was actually driving down to hear those confessions, I was driving down to Stamford, and I was going to catch the train from there, park the car. It's a lot cheaper parking in Stamford than it is in downtown Manhattan. And I was just going to take the train. And as I was coming off the 15 onto the 8, I'd been on to the 8 for a little bit, heading towards the 95. And I could see traffic was backing up, because that's a tough little entrance onto 95. And I could see that we were about just under a half a mile out, and traffic was backing up. And as I started to slow down, I saw this explosion of plastic in front of me. Poof. And one car went that way, and one went that way. So I was about 3 to 4 cars back, and I could see the steam coming out of the one car, and as I went by slowly, I looked, and she was okay, but I could tell she was trying to fathom what just happened. And so the other one, who was on this side, her whole back end had been crushed in. So I pulled up in front of her, and I got out, and I walked up to her door, and I opened it, and she was bleeding from her eye and part of her face. So I just opened up, and I said, how are you doing? And she looked at me, and she started to cry, and I said, you're going to be okay. So I could see she had some napkins, and I grabbed them, and I told her to put it to her eye, and that's when she realized she was bleeding. And so she started wiping her face, and then she kind of panicked a little bit. And the 911, we had them on the phone, and so I'm explaining where we're at. And then I looked, and on the back of her neck, she was really bleeding here. So I told her, you're going to have to put a thing here. And she could see it, and she started to really say, I'm bleeding in places. I'm bleeding in too many places. I said, you're okay. You're going to be okay. Right? And so we talked, and I just told her, you're going to be okay. And then finally the police came, and the first officer came, and he just looked at me and goes, Father, I'm glad you're here. And once they got everything under control, I just left it. And then I just prayed my rosary for these ladies on the way, because I know that accident was going to affect both of their lives. And I don't know in what way. But they were going to both feel the effect of something that neither one of them were looking for, but it happened. And the resurrection didn't take it away. But he will give meaning to it if we can find him there, and if we will look for him there. So the psalm continues, O gates, lift high your heads, grow higher, ancient doors. Let him enter, the King of glory. Let him enter. If you've ever been to the Holy Land, the only gate facing east, what's called the Golden Gate, or the Gate of Mercy, the Mercy Gate, is actually been sealed over, and tombs have been put in front of it, because that's the gate through which the Messiah is supposed to pass. In fact, our Lord on Palm Sunday, he passed through that gate that leads into the temple. And I remember seeing that the first time, and it's all sealed up, and I'm like, why would they seal that? I mean, that's not going to keep our Lord out. But very often we think, or we find that we box him out if we're not careful. We can't keep him out, but he won't barge his way in. But that little walled up gate was not going to keep out the King of Glory. But the psalm reminds you and me that we have got to raise our portals, because he is so much bigger than my circumstances. He is so much greater than my weaknesses. He's stronger than sin. He's stronger than death. There's nothing stronger than him, except my refusal to say, I won't let you in. And once again on this Easter Sunday, we're reminded of the power of his faithfulness, the power of his love, the tenaciousness of his love that is stronger than death. And brothers and fathers and gentlemen and ladies, lift up that portal. Whatever fear it is that I think is stronger than me, let him in. And let's beg him during this Easter season. We know he is stronger than death. We know he's alive. When our Lord rises from the dead, what does the church tell us today in today's responsorial psalm? This is the day the Lord has made. But we heard last night, he made the sun and the moon, and he separated the day from the night. He made that day. But this day's different. This day, by rising from the dead, he created something that never existed before in his resurrection. This day is the day of the resurrection. The resurrection is the final word. It's not your weaknesses. It's not your limitations. It's not your refusal to forgive. Stronger than that is his love, his victory, his power. And that's what makes us saints. That's what transforms us. And we're invited once again to believe it, to trust it, and to give it all the space that it needs, all the space that he asks. Lift up, O ancient gate, your portal. Let him enter, the King of glory, because he wants to transform your life and then send you out as a witness to the reality of his cross that is an expression of his love and is united fully to his resurrection.